All right, we mentioned these before. These are the sometimes called spoon worms, sometimes called penis worms. So if you want to look up penis worm tide, you'll see it happening in Northern California recently. We had a big bloom of these things out on the beach. So a really small group, again, benthic marine, living in the mud, filter feeders or deposit feeders, okay? And they're called spoon worms often because they have this spoon-like structure called the prostomium up on top of that trunk, okay? And so they're found in shallow water or sometimes deep sea, okay? And they do this thing called inkeeping. So they make called spoon worms or penis worms or innkeeper worms. And the inkeeping is where you see the trunk here in the mud, and they have that spoon out on top of the mud, okay? Then if they move down further into that burrow, they create a mucus net up here in the top of this burrow, and it allows them to feed up there too. Okay, so they can either have this walking proboscis, the spoon will walk around the muck and help them eat, or they'll catch stuff in the mucus net as they're filter feeding. So they're called innkeeper worms sometimes because they're keeping the inn, which is this little burrow that they've made. Okay, so they put these things, Eurechus caupo, they put these things into tubes and watched how they make these mucus nets. Pretty cool. So you can see how the innkeeper worm's in action. And again, we'll continue with our parade of weird worms with subclass Pogonophora. And these are called bearded tube worms. So really small group, only 80 species here. No digestive tract whatsoever. And these are all marine. In fact, they are all deep sea. So deep sea greater than 1,000 meters in depth. Okay. And they were only really recently discovered, so 1900, and they live in these chitinous tubes. So for a long time, people didn't really know what to do with them, but when they realized that they had these chitinous tubes that they were making, it means that they might be in this group annelids. So we see chitin using in annelids in lots of different places, right? And they form these really dense aggregations, and they were just recently moved into Annelida, okay? So for these things, again, we see this kind of trunk formation and a plume on top. But what really got them into annelids is going to be some of the things like the chitin tubes and some of the other similarities there. Okay. Okay. So in addition to their body parts, this plume, the trunk, the trophosome, they're deep sea. So it's very low oxygen and very low food in the deep sea. And so what's been found about them to be really interesting is they have these chemoautotrophic bacteria. So bacteria that will actually make chemicals and they live symbiotically with them to allow them to live in their deep sea environment. Okay, so we had our one class of polychaetes, okay? And our second class within annelids is Clitolata, okay? So that's going to be 3,000 species of earthworms and leeches. And these are unified by having something called a clitellum, okay? So they have no parapodia. So our polychaetes are the parapodia. Clitolata does not have parapodia. And they don't really have any CD, okay? So they have very few, if any. And these are monoecious, meaning that they're going to be both making eggs and sperm in the same body, right? In addition to these structures, the class Clitolata has direct development, which means that what hatches out of the egg is not a different form than the adult. So a tiny baby worm hatches out of the egg and then develops directly into a much larger egg. So humans have direct development, right? We are born as small people and we grow into larger people. But something like an insect is going to have indirect development where they hatch into a different form than the adult form. We'll talk more about that with arthropods as well. Okay, so within our class Clitolata, we have subclass Ligochaeta. These are going to be your classic earthworms, primarily freshwater or terrestrial. Very few CD, no distinct head. And these are primarily scavengers, so they're just moving around, eat whatever they can find. Okay. And hopefully we'll get to do a dissection of these in lab where you'll be able to see all these different parts, right? But what you can see here is that typical earthworm, mouth and anus. Sometimes you can tell which end is the mouth because the anus is at the end of the tail, which tends to be a little bit thinner. And this clitellum, this area here that makes them part of that class Clitolata, is closer to that anterior end. They don't actually have any sensory structures up there though. So though they're trying to move around and eat and feed, they don't have any sensory structures up there by the head. So that's different than a lot of other organisms. And we said because they're not in class Polychaeta, they don't have any parapodia. And they really don't have a distinct head either. So there's a mouth end up there, but no other kind of head-like structures up there. Okay. If you have never seen an earthworm move, now's the time. Go look what places. Hopefully it's going to rain again soon. You can go find some earthworms and watch them do this, where they're going to contract the muscles to kind of inch forward, right, and move forward. So we've got waves of contractions of those muscles passing from anterior to posterior, and you get alternating contractions. So I think in a little bit, I will post a video of a worm moving as well, so you can see this in action, because it is really pretty cool. Okay, for digestion, we've got a mouth, we've got a pharynx, we've got start to have differentiation of digestive tract. So we see the normal structures here, right? Stomach, crop, and gizzard. There's also a calciferous gland in there, an intestine, and an anus. Okay, so that's going to be a Ligochaeta, and we'll see them in lab, hopefully. Also in Clitolata, there's subclass Hirundinia. So these used to be different classes, and then they group them together into Clitolata to make them subclasses. So Hirundinia is our friends here, the leeches, freshwater, marine, terrestrial. Not that many species of them, but obviously they're very famous because they mostly suck blood. They have 34 body segments, and again, they have reduced CD or absent CD. So similar to our earthworms, they're going to look like that, which is again why they're put in that same class together. But they're kind of flat dorsoventrally, so maybe you've never seen a leech, maybe you have. If you have, you'll notice that they are kind of dorsoventrally flattened, okay? And they're going to feed primarily on small invertebrates or the body fluid, so they do suck blood in a lot of cases. Okay, so they have suckers, suck blood, they have circular muscles in there, longitudinal muscles in there, and oblique muscles in there. And our normal body parts we're going to see for digestion, okay? All right. Leeches can move like inchworms. So unlike we saw those circular contractions happening to make our earthworms move forward, leeches can do this more inching-like movement. Okay. Gas exchange is going to be completed via diffusion. They have sinuses instead of vessels for their blood. And again, like we saw in another group, the coelomic fluid takes on the blood function. So no respiratory pigments in this class or subclass. And the coelomic fluid, so the fluid in the coelom, is acting like the blood normally would in an animal. Nervous system, really similar to polychaetes, and really advanced and lots of these modified metanephridia. So lots and lots and lots of structures dedicated to water balance and ion balance. Leeches are going to be monoecious, so making eggs and sperm in the same animal. And they have that clitellum. And so for the this whole class Clitolata, this clitellum, which you can see really definitively on the earthworms, is going to be a structure that aids in reproduction and helps them make an egg case and make some egg structures too. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop there and post this video, and then our next one will be on arthropods, so stay tuned. Thanks for joining me in my first video, and I can't wait to hear what you guys think. Bye!